viewers, wherever you are, hello and welcome to this new episode of your program, Out of the Box. This is the second episode that we're talking about secularism. During the last episode, we talked about the pros of secularism. And according to our guest, who was 100% pro-secularism, he said that secularism is the ultimate goal of every modern state. And through secularism, we can achieve equality and prosperity for all members of a secular society. Today, we will talk about the flip of this coin. What are the disadvantages and the shortcomings, the cons of secularism? To shed more light on that, I'm really delighted to be accompanied by a returning guest who is an independent researcher and translator. Joining us from Cairo, Egypt, is Mohammed Farouk. Mohammed, hello and welcome to the program one more time.
Hello, Mohammed. I'm quite happy to meet again.
The pleasure is always mine, Mohammed. And to start off, how do you personally define secularism? Do you see that the definition of saying that it's separation of church and state or politics and state, is that sufficient or is that too simplified?
Yes, usually this is whenever someone is asking what is secularism, the usual short answer is separation between religion and state or between politics and state. And that's not incorrect, but it's not inclusive. I mean, secularism started off as a separation between religious authority and political authority, and on that level, we can, which is quite general, we can say that this is something that's quite common in all states. If we can say any state, when it reaches a degree of growth and complexity, some sort of separation on the procedural side is required of who does what. But it's not limited to that. I mean, we can add another layer that it also implies a separation between religion and the public domain or the public sphere. That that's not limited to the political activity, but also includes the economic and the social. And we can still add a third layer of meaning and possibility of what secularism covers, is that it's the separation between religion and anything that is it's a separation between man and life from anything that is outside this world. So it is making the world its own center, its own reference, its own start and end of any human activity.
And would you say that secularism is anti the metaphysical world completely? Like it wants to just totally put aside and marginalize metaphysics completely and the spiritual domain? Do you think that it is fair to say that secularism is anti-religious and pro-atheism? Is this fair to say?
Well, there's no a clear yes and no to this, but it depends on what, if I could say, what aspect or ratio of secularism we are talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Because on the procedural level, the mere separation between entities and authorities, and that by itself is not necessarily anti-religion or pro-atheism. But once we move to the area of of looking at secularism as a total worldview that sees the human existence as only something that is defined by nature and the laws of nature and the laws of science and all the constraints of the time and space. Once we step into this domain, so we can of course will be a friction between a secularist view and a religious view. Whether that reaches atheism or not, it's a matter of spectrum. It depends in as much as, because as we know, every human being or every human group is a complex entity. So as much as you internalize and assimilate a materialistic worldview that looks at the world, and actually this is one of the not definitions but statements of secular philosophers. It's about disenchantment or desacralization of the world, that the world becomes defined by what is inside the world and not by anything outside the world or anything that transcends the world as we know it, which is physical existence. So as much as you migrate from the procedural to the total and philosophical, especially in adopting secularism as a view that defines human activities and human endeavor as just by interest, by pursuing materialistic achievements and pursuits, as much as you step into that, and as much as you adopt and assimilate the idea of denying that there is a center of the world outside the world that transcends the world, that there is something other than, deny anything other than the materialistic laws of nature and physics. So the more friction you have with a religious perspective.
Okay, so before we proceed more, let's just stop with our viewers with this short report about the basics of secularism, and we'll be back.
Secularism. The separation of religion and state is the base of secularism. Secularism ensures that religious groups do not interfere in state affairs, and at the same time, it ensures that the state does not interfere in religious affairs. Secularism seeks to guarantee and protect freedom of religious belief and practice for all citizens. Secularists want freedoms of thought and conscience to apply equally to all believers and non-believers alike. Secularism seeks to defend the absolute freedom of religious and other beliefs. It also seeks to protect the right to manifest religious belief to the extent that it does not interfere with the rights and freedoms of others. Secularism guarantees the right of individuals to freedom of religion, as well as the right to be free from all religious beliefs. In a secular democracy, all citizens are equal before the law. Religious or political affiliation does not give advantages or disadvantages to their affiliates. Believers, the non-religious, as well as the atheists, are all citizens who have the same rights and responsibilities. Secularism supports equality laws that protect women, LGBTQ, and minorities from religion-based discrimination. In the secular system, everyone shares all services, from hospitals, schools, police, and all other local authorities' services. In a secular system, all state-funded schools must also be non-religious in nature, and children must be taught together regardless of their religion. When a public body awards a contract to provide services to an organization associated with a particular religion or belief, those services given by this organization must be provided impartially without any attempt to promote the ideas of that religious group. It is important to stress that secularism itself does not seek to challenge any particular religion or belief, nor does it seek to impose atheism on anyone. Finally, in a truly secular society, all ideas and beliefs should be open to discussion.
Dear viewers, after watching this short report about the basics of secularism, we're back again to our discussion here. So before the discussion, you're talking about that secularism, emphasizes really the materialistic aspect of life, and just tries to, separate us from any other domains or paradigms outside of the materialistic or the tangible world, really. So do you think that there is a some kind of relation, or like, is there some kind of a cause and effect between secularism and then things like absurdism and existentialism? So basically, humanity is in perpetual anguish, and that basically existence precedes essence. Like, is there some kind of relationship between secularism, then absurdism, and existentialism?
Yes, of course, and we can say that there is possibly a dual relationship, that because since historically secularism has preceded these movements that have appeared in 20th century. So of course these movements and these directions were one of the effects or offsprings of secularism, and because these ideas about absurdity and the loss of order and the loss of meaning and any goal or any direction in life, that was unthinkable in any traditional civilization. It's unthinkable and unimaginable. So on the one hand, these movements are an effect, one of the fruits of secularism, and on the other hand, these movements have served to accentuate one of the basics and axioms of secularism, which is the idea of dealing with the sacred, that there is no sacred, because if you believe in a meaning, then the idea of a meaning necessarily requires something sacred, something what is constant, what is above the realm of changes and the realm of movement in history. So both relationship exists.
So why again in the popular mind there terms like atheism and secularism tend to be sort of interchangeable or synonymous?
Because I mean, on the ground, we can say that atheism secularism by itself, it is not technically an atheistic doctrine in terms of denying the existence of God, but it has paved the way through history to 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 ideas and axioms that came later that is now being used as a basis and foundation of secularism, of atheism. So and probably because as atheism is on the rise in the world now, especially in the Western world, so there is this and people tend to make this correlation between the nature of the identity of the political system and the public and the way things are led in the public are managed in the public sphere and atheism. But technically speaking and in the origin of definition, secularism does not necessarily require an atheistic position, but it could.
Yeah, and how do you see the relation between civil states, civil democracies, again, modern states, failware states, and secularism? Because most, if not all, tend to be very secular states. While on the other hand, that states that derive their constitutions from religious teachings and whatnot tend to be by far much less developed and, again, much less democratic. Is there is secularism a prerequisite for civil democratic societies, in your opinion?
Well, secularism is a prerequisite for the modern state. There's no doubt about this, because I mean we can say that all modern states are secular by definition. Whether this is good or bad, that's another question. But advanced modern states, as we know it right now, we can say that secularism is in the heart of their formation.
And if we talk about like freedom, mutual respect, liberty, equality, and all the different values that humanity is looking, towards achieving, do you think it is inevitable to apply secularism to achieve these goals? Is there a way to have democracy, equality, freedom, liberty, without secularism? Is that at all a possibility?
Well, it depends on our definition of these things, because these words like development, liberty, and liberalism are they come with a cultural background. We cannot really assume it's universalism and it's that is something that is universally human. Across the history, human civilizations have assumed quite various possibilities. Actually, the claim of the modern state that it has achieved the optimum or the ultimate possibility for human prosperity, that's a claim to be questioned. We should not take it as a premise that this is the ideal that every human community or every nation should aspire for. Because just as we are talking about part of the picture that has to do with respect for the other and acceptance and tolerance, it's these very same states, these very same secular modern states that were engaged in imperialism, that they were engaged in actions and endeavors that are quite against anything human. And And that's not just something by coincidence or something that outside the plan and then they have repented. Actually, the imperialist view and action in history, that's closely related to the idea of to one of the axioms of secularism and modernity, because modernity, since it has removed the absolute and God from the center, and man with his ideas and his analytical mind has become in the center, and consequently his desires. So looking at the world as something to be used for the benefit and interest of that new entity, which is the modern state, was quite inevitable. It had to look at the other with this way. It had to look at the other nations that are different and have different civilization as something that is less, something that is to be corrected, and something and is to be used for its own goals.
Well, like somebody might argue again, like, there is always political propaganda, always political corruption, politics is not ever a fair game. And if you want to really judge secularism, look at what happens within the secular societies, not outside. So, yes, somebody might say that secular societies or secular governments might act in a very, very different way that has nothing to do with humanity, or it has nothing to do with equality or secularism or democracy outside of the borders. But within the borders, where the people live, there is freedom, there's equality, there's prosperity, and so on. So it's not really proper to judge what they do outside of the border, because again, politics is by nature 100% pragmatic, and the ends justifies the means, really. So, but how about judging the societies within? which citizen enjoys a greater amount of freedom, of respect, and of welfare? Is it the citizen living in a secular society, or the one who's living in a non-secular one?
Well, first of all, I don't think we can make this separation between what happens outside the borders and what happens inside the borders, because actually they are related. It's not merely we're not talking only about the very old game of politics and wars and the clash of empires and all that. That's part of history. But here we're talking about something additional, another layer that were added to this scheme, which is looking at the other and other nations and other people as something to be used in a legitimate way to feed a new entity that has a lot of requirements, which is the modern state. So actually, they are both related, because the kind of prosperity or this kind of new life that is based on prosperity in a very specific sense, which is the materialistic sense, that has required that the Western civilization, or this new civilization, which is a modern civilization that looks for a lot of resources, and see that it has a legitimate right to do so because it is more advanced, because it is better. So actually, this kind of prosperous life would have not been made possible without the imperialist project. So there is a relationship between what happens outside the borders and what happens inside. The other thing is that we really need to look at terms like prosperity and welfare and what they really mean, and whether these are things that are to be targeted as an absolute thing for its own self, and this is enough for anything that as matters of concerns for a human being, or that the human condition and the human and human beings, whether as individuals or communities, by virtue of their nature, they require something else, and that is not limited to just achieving economic prosperity.
So, if we talk about the freedom of faith and belief again, obviously we can see that people who believe in all different faith and religions around the world, the people who tend to live in these secular modern societies, they have the freedom of worship and the freedom of building any temples, any synagogues, any mosques, etc., etc. Nobody would ever stop anyone from practicing any kind of faith or following any sect or initiating a cult even. Everyone has this freedom, and they have the freedom of, maybe with the exception of laïcité, which might be the extreme French or Francophone version of secularism, which might prevent any religious signs. But in most other societies, the very, very rare few exceptions of extremist people, but extremists are found everywhere, actually. And on the other side of the spectrum, we might talk about more extremism. But anyways, generally speaking, they have the freedom to wear whatever they want, and they have the freedom of having religious schools even as well, and religious celebrations and whatnot. A freedom that they do not enjoy in their own countries of origin, in the countries that derive their values and constitutional rights from religious texts. And even if you talk about imperialism and invasion and colonialism and whatnot, like somebody might argue, like Iraq, when it was ruled by Saddam Hussein, for example, or even before with the Ba'ath Party, the Ba'ath Party that was ruling Iraq, you had a minority ruling a majority, and Shiites were, prosecuted and persecuted because of their beliefs. But later on, with the coming of the Americans or the international forces, in 2003, with the liberation of Iraq, according to the Western point of view, minorities like Kurds are enjoying their freedom after they were hit by chemical weapons. The city of Halabja was hit by chemical weapons during the time of Saddam Hussein. Again, the Shiites can finally practice their, religious freedom. And they were prevented totally from practicing, their Shiite faith because they were considered to be a fifth column for Iran. So isn't everybody much more well off, with secularism?
Well, the example of Iraq actually demonstrates how the Western view is used as a premise for any evaluation, and even unconsciously, because we all know that on the ground, what happened for the Iraqi people, whether by American forces or by the militias of all sides. But the thing is that when things like democracy are blown out of proportion and seen that's something that you should pay to achieve any price is acceptable to have elections and to have institutions of a certain nature, even at the price of integral and basic things themselves, at life themselves. So this demonstrates something that's quite problematic and needs to be questioned. That what are the criteria when we compare between two things or two possibilities or a different array of conditions in the human society. The modern world, by its nature, practices a kind of self-centered way that it assumes that making the others or transforming the other nations to be like its model is something that is of an unquestionable nature. And once something is looked at as unquestionable, so any price is acceptable to achieve it, and that's quite at least this needs to be questioned.
So do you think this? Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, the other thing about which is related, that when you're saying that wouldn't the opinion that says that wouldn't everybody be good with the secularism, since everybody is enjoying the freedom of practicing their faith. Actually, the freedom of practicing faith is not something, I mean, for the secular state, is not something that is done for moral reasons or out of respect for this faith. It is because the modern state, as it is, it has reached a very high state of power and control over the society, that it can allow a practice of worldviews that is quite different from its own and quite different from the one it seeks to implement and make it predominant. That's why this is allowed. It is not out of a respect for these faiths, because on many issues and on many fronts there are quite differences. The other thing is that is freedom of faith, is this the one and only, or freedom in general, and liberty in general, is this the one and only thing that man needs for his integral well-being and not just economic prosperity? I mean, if we assume that these are questions that to be contemplated, if there is a society or a certain civilization like the modern civilization that is providing certain rights and certain individual liberties, but on the side of worldviews and direction, it seeks it is based on materialistic consumerist behaviors. It is based on encouraging currents that work on dismantling the unity of the family. If it seeks to desacralize the world, meaning that it looks at the world in a mechanical, industrial way that should only look for progress and make accumulations of materialistic progress in a quantitative way. What is, if this civilization is the only civilization in human history that has destroyed the environment? I mean, in these thousands of years in human history, we don't know about a single civilization that has destroyed the environment and put the entire human community under threat. So if we are comparing between what is good and what's bad and the pros and cons in terms of its impact on the human condition in its core and and in things that really matter, so how should we answer this?
So just finally, and last but never least, actually, because we can talk about this really forever, and like on a scale balance here, like if we want to put things on a scale balance and see, like, definitely secularism, there's never been, and there will never be. A system that is absolutely flawless, and there are always pros and cons to every system, and nobody would ever dare say that secularism or secular societies is heaven on earth. Of course not. We don't have a utopia here, but which kind of system respects more, the rights of humanity and treats humans as mature beings? So I'm given the freedom of choice in everything. So I choose who rules me. I choose my system of education. I choose my public system. I choose what faith to follow. I choose my gender. I get to choose everything. But again, at the same time, I must respect the difference between me and other people. On the other hand, you have societies that don't practice what they preach. So they preach and preach and preach very good things, but on the ground, there is complete chaos and civil strife. So again, on a balance scale, from a very, very objective point of view, which one should prevail? Like, there are definitely shortcomings for everything, but which one should prevail? Again, the non-secular societies are 100% dependent on the secular societies. What did the non-secular societies in this day and age give to the world compared to the secular societies? What did they give to humanity in all fields of science, technology, intellect, philosophy, and whatnot? How would you see this, really? Like, if we put them both on scale balance?
I mean, such questions of such questions of significance should always go back to the matter of basic principles. It is one should align himself, or at least try to do so. One should align with the kind of worldview, total view that is in favor of the human being in his totality. And when we say that the human being in his totality, that we should always remind ourselves that a human being is not limited to his materialistic side. He is not limited to his consumer side. There is a duality between what is human and what is materialistic. There is a side that's materialistic, but a human being, by virtue of who he is a complex being that includes what is natural and what is materialistic and what is beyond.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mohammed, but again, like in the non-secular societies, humans are not enjoying anything, neither the physical nor the metaphysical.
I beg to this. That's a very Orientalist perspective, and we cannot really make such a generalization so easily. First of all, it is what one enjoys or not or doesn't enjoy, or when we say that something is good or bad, we should ask about self what reference we are dealing with. Mm-hmm. What reference or criteria we are basing our judgment on. The Orientalism, and as I remember now, Dr. Wael Halak, who is an American professor of Islamic studies and modernism research. He's from a Palestinian background and Christian background, which is quite interesting. He mentioned that Orientalism is something that that the Western modern civilization is the only civilization that has practiced Orientalism, which is to study the other as an object of, or as a project of assimilation and utilization. So actually, the Western assessment of that non-secular societies are not enjoying anything, or just because they don't have the same system, so they are miserable, is quite limited. We acknowledge, and there is no doubt about that, that in terms of that the secular societies or modern societies in general, they have managed to achieve a good degree of control of nature, and that has its benefits. It has managed to do some kind of organization and rationalization of human activities in the natural domain. But the problem is, and the problem is when in this when it looked only at this side, when there was removal of anything else, removal of any other dimensions of the human being, which are when we talk about the spiritual or dimension, or the dimension of meaning, of meaning, or the dimension of transcendence. These are not trivialities. These are not intellectual. These are not a matter of intellectual enjoyment. These are matters of integral significance. We cannot say that because there are liberty, that human beings in secular societies are happy. We know about the rates of mental illness. We know about the degree of loneliness, and that the depression and anxiety are becoming the illnesses of the age. These are not matters to be skipped in passing, or just looked at in passing. There are reasons for this. There is a foundation for this. It's a paradox that although that the contemporary individual, he enjoys things that even rich people did not enjoy in older ages, in pre-modern societies. But at the same time, and we cannot overlook the fact that an average person 300 years ago used to have a better quality of food, a better quality of air, and a better quality of water than a rich person who living in the modern age. And these things are not. This is not a coincidence. So we are talking here ultimately, and on the higher level, about two directions of civilizations: traditional civilizations versus the modern civilization. And each one has pushed in a certain direction. And each one of the two models have a certain emphasis. Which emphasis? The question to be contemplated by everyone. Which emphasis that is of more threat to human communities, and which emphasis that emphasize what is most real and integral about human community?
Again, of course, the discussion could go on forever about secularism and non-secularism. Again, which one gave more and which one gave less? Yes, in secular societies, they might have, they've harmed the nature, but again, non-secular societies, they didn't harm the nature, but they harmed the status of, there was slavery, there was like women's rights, etc., etc. We can definitely discuss this forever, but again, of course, there is a big overlap and between secularism and many other aspects that we'll be discussing in the episodes to come. So, Mohammed, thank you very much again, as always, for being here and for shedding light on all these different things and for having this very fruitful discussion. Here in this program, I do not necessarily or actually at all represent my own personal point of view about things, but I always try to represent the other party, whoever is not present at the moment. Hamad, thank you very much again, and really looking forward to having you as our future guest many more times.
Thank you very, very much, Muhammad. It was a pleasure.
Pleasure is always mine. Thank you. And dear viewers, if we were to recap here, I think the ultimate goal for everyone is the welfare of humanity. The human, himself or herself. And I think the ultimate goal of religions, a lot of people might argue, is the welfare of humans, not in the hereafter only, not in the afterlife only, but within this life that we're living in as well. Some extremist point of view might say, no, it would just call for martyrdom and you should be completely secluded from this evil life, but many others would argue the opposite. Again, there are always disadvantages and shortcomings for everything, but what we should really care for is the human himself, because the atrocities, the destructions, and the indignities that we face throughout the ages, since the inception and the dawn of humanity until today, we've seen unspeakable evil, really, happened in all sorts of societies that humanity has ever witnessed. So it is about time that we put humanity as first and foremost. Dear viewers, until we'll meet again, thank you very much for watching.